Good evening, friends. I am Saket Bansal, and today I am presenting a webinar on Perform Integrated Change Control. In this session, we will be primarily talking about how to manage change requests, what kind of flow a change request should follow, and how changes get introduced in a project, and what kind of things are subjected to be a formal change control process. So this is the kind of things we would be discussing in this particular session. Before I go forward, I always start with a poll because it's very difficult to know the audience in a virtual platform. So while using this particular poll, I can get a feeling of the participants. So please select your options. I have two questions for you, and these questions will help me to correct and schedule my session. Now, I'm asking the first question is about the certification, because many of our participants who join our web events are primarily preparing for some sort of certification. So I want to know, out of this audience set, how many of you are working for a given certification. So please, just an option. If you are not looking for any certification, you can click other, because that is the only option we have. We don't have a none option. So you can pick up the others as an option if you are not looking for the certification. Great. So I have a good feeling of the participants. Just sharing information with you, majority of our participants, approximately 69% of our participation is coming from people who are preparing for PMP. Great. So a second question, where I want to know your role. So you just not need to be an exact designation. Whichever role is near to your work, just pick up, click it. That are you working as a project program manager or a project leader, scrum master, project management group, developer, tester, whatever is near to your profile. Great. So this result I will share with you, so you also get a feeling of your fellow participants, because it's a virtual event, so you also not need to know who is around you. So I'm closing the poll and sharing the result. It will give you a feel of that, yes, we have a majority again coming from project managers. We have a good amount of project leaders, and the rest are following a relatively small minority. So if you are in a majority section, you are good with this session content, because this particular webinar is more focused towards project management role and towards the PMP certification. So I think we have prepared the content as per the audience base. So let's start it. Let's get started and let's see what all we have in today's session. So as I said, we would be talking about change. We will be talking about what this change is all about, why do we need to do it, and who can raise a change request and who can ask for a change, and how to manage a change. So this is the how part is the area which will take good amount of our time. And finally, we will talk about when can a change occur in a project environment. During this particular session, I will be taking two Q&A breaks, so one in the mid and one at the end. So whenever you have a question, you keep typing in a question box or an interface which you have, where you can and type your queries, and I will be looking at them during my Q&A breaks. So let's define what is change. Like when somebody says that we need to change something in a project, and it can mean many things. A change management itself is a subject. In many organization theories, it primarily deals with changing the organization behavior, changing the organization structure, because many times when we want to introduce new way of doing things, we start with changes. But for us, for this particular webinar, our focus is primarily on project related changes. Our focus is primarily on PMBOK definition of change. Our focus is primarily on the changes which a project manager deals with on their day-to-day life. So we are starting with a change, that modification needed in any document, deliverable, or baseline. So if you have a need of modifying project documents, if you have a need of changing the project deliverables. For example, you may have a demo product ready, or you have a one deliverable which you want to deliver to the customer, and they do a final inspection before they accept it, and they come up with the changes. So changes which is needed in a deliverable or in a baseline. So in project management language, we talk about scope baseline, cost baseline, and time baseline. So if there is a proposal to change a baseline, that also falls under what is changed. So a modification which is needed in any project document, deliverable, or a baseline is a scope of our today's web event. So why do we need to change? Why can't we just make a project plan and follow it? Because changes are always they create trouble. They make project manager do a lot of replanning. It requires a lot of effort to manage these kind of changes. So why do we need to do change? Because it's a famous military quote, and it keeps talking about that the military plan, they never survives contact with enemy, but still we keep planning. So similarly, the project management deals into a uncertain domain. We don't know how the requirements will exactly get converted into the deliverables, because if we know the process very well, it becomes an operation. You don't need project management knowledge areas and tools, because it is too predictable. So since it's not predictable, you can't plan it very well in advance. So you as a project manager need to be ready for the changes, because you can't have that kind of visibility. Project team keep learning. Like, you start with a small requirement, you think of a one solution. When you elaborate that thing further, or when you meet clients, or when you meet your stakeholders, customers, you know more things about your product. You know more about the project environment. You know more about your assumptions, because all project management planning, all project management estimations are based on lots of assumptions. So you keep learning, and those learning triggers changes in your plan, in your deliverable, in your documents. The surrounding environments keeps changing. Something which was very attractive for the stakeholder 3 months ago or 4 months ago may become irrelevant and not that much valuable after the competitor launch a similar product. So environment, from competition, from government regulation, from weather, these things keeps changing, because and in order to accommodate, in order to figure out or adapt to these changes, you end up changing the project plan, project deliverables, and sometimes project documents as well. So you need to change. You can't live without it. Now, there are various types of changes we do, and if I roughly look at that, what kind of changes, if I want to just categorize them, I found out that these 4 category works well. Like people change because stakeholder think of that there is some value add, there is some great feature. If that is included in a product, that can add good customer value. So value add is one of the change trigger. External event, which includes all the environment or all the assumption related area which is beyond the control of project team, they also triggers a change. A good amount of changes are triggered from error or omissions, and I did this poll many times in my PMP classes, on various LinkedIn groups, that out of these 4 categories, which one is the most frequently seen change in your project environment? And I keep getting consistent answer. The biggest or the most number of changes comes because of error or omissions. And it is something like we keep learning. We can't visualize everything ahead. So we miss a lot of things. We miss including stakeholder. We miss doing many things. And those things triggers changes when we get into the project. Anytime, because of the risk, we end up raising change, because you might have selected one particular component and you find out that this particular component has a security risk attached to it, and you don't want to put your system into security threat, so you may want to replace that particular component. It is coming because of a risk response. So those kind of triggers may also create a situation where you need to change. Now the question, who can ask for a change? Is it like project manager, team member, or anyone who is related to the project can ask for a change? So changes can come from various sources. as you have seen, the dimensions or the categorization of change which I have used in this particular presentation, the changes can come from your customer, from your stakeholders. It may come in order to fix a defect, because you have noticed a defect while you were doing inspection, or customer might have found out a defect, and if you want to fix that particular defect, you need to change some of the existing baselines or some of the existing deliverables. So a defect repair may also trigger a change. Preventive and corrective actions. You are doing say analysis or a root cause analysis of various defects or various non-compliance which has been observed in your project, and you figure it out that looks like that we are not doing things well, we are trying to do things in too much hurry, we need to do it in a different way, we need to take a different approach for this problem, else these kind of changes, these kind of defects will keep accumulating. So you may decide to take some preventive and corrective actions, and they results into changes in your existing baseline plan, changes into your existing agreed or sign off of documents. Project team may also come up with the changes. They find out that a stakeholder have agreed to a good technical solution, and they like that particular solution when the team has proposed to the stakeholder. But once the team went back and they started designing that particular solution, they figured out that this particular solution is coming out to be a very expensive for the system performance, and they want this specification to be changed as they have learned more, and they may ask for a change. So many time in software industry, we think of changes are only coming from customer, and many time we relate change with only a scope related changes which is asked by the customer. But for the project management, for the PMP exam, we should not limit the change trigger to only a customer generated scope related changes. We need to consider all the other sources which can trigger change in a project document, baseline plan, or a deliverable. Now this is an important area where we would be spending good amount of time of this particular webinar: how to manage change, what to do with this particular change request, and how to take it forward. So we need to have a formal process which takes care of change, and it first starts with a change request. We need to have a formal proposal to modify any document, deliverable, or baseline, or in a different word, we need a formal proposal for making change. And before going forward, so let's take a poll. I posted this particular poll in our forum, but I want to know what our audience thinks about that. Do we need a change request for modifying project documents? And let's see, I have some inputs which I have gathered from my forum poll, but yes, I would like to see how this audience set looks at this particular problem. So do we need a change request for modifying project documents? Now you might have seen my presentation, which is keep reiterating that change is about to do with project documents, deliverables, and baseline. And you may think that, okay, you have been telling it again and again, and why are you asking this particular poll? Why you are asking us these questions? Because you may think that it's obvious answer yes, but there is a reason behind it. So I need to ask this question. Quickly select your options. We are approaching the 75% mark of a voting. Okay, great. So we are approaching 80, and I am about to close the poll, assuming that all of you have selected your choices. Now here are the results. So 58% of you believe that yes, we need a change request for modifying project documents. 10% believes no, we don't need it, we can just change it. And 33% believes it depends. Great. So let's understand what are these project documents. Let's take an example. A project document, a stakeholder register is a project document. Requirement traceability matrix is a project document. So if I want to change a requirement traceability matrix, or if I want to add one more stakeholder to my stakeholder register do I need to risk register is a change request, is a project document. So in order to just take a one example of requirement traceability matrix, if I want to add one more requirement to make sure the traceability can be maintained in a requirement traceability matrix, do I need to raise a change request for that? Now the answer lies on how you have defined changes or handling of changes in your change management plan. You may include a very elaborative change management process for managing requirement traceability metrics, or for managing and controlling various project document. You may not have, but it is not mandatory. So it depends upon how you define your change management plan in your project management plan. As for a definition of change, you should be looking at project document and a candidate for manage and control using a formal change control process. But there could be instances where you don't want to put them under very defined change request process. So the answer for this would be, from my point of view, it depends. It depends what type of document you are talking about. It depends what you have defined in your change management plan. It depends upon what type of project you are dealing with, because if it's a fixed price project which deals with a very complex solution, the requirement traceability matrix could be a very well managed and controlled document. You can't change it without taking a formal approval. If it is not that type of project, if it's a, say, time and material project where customer is paying for all the time and material you are spending, and you may not, because the requirements are not very clear, you may not follow a very stringent process for changing the requirement traceability metrics. So a few like some kind of a conversation which is happening between a stakeholder or a business user and a project manager. So things starts many times is that I want to change the scope to get a better product. Business people get lots of ideas, and especially when the project duration is long, like if you're running a 1-year project, things keeps changing and business people come up with lots of new ideas which they want to put into your project scope. And as a project manager, you need to tell that, okay, we can talk about it. Please raise the change request. Means please give me a formal proposal for your change. And many times, business people say, can you do it for me? Why you are asking that I have to raise change request? Many times you may find a practice question which is talking about who raises the change request. Can the project manager raise the change request? The answer is yes. Even project manager can raise a change request on the behalf of a stakeholder, but he needs to communicate that you need to own it. The stakeholder who is raising the change request needs to own it. So even if project manager is raising in a system, this person has to approve it, or this person has to acknowledge it, that yes, this is the particular change which I have requested. Now please take it in a formal change control process. So he needs to own it when a project team take it for analysis and approval. So assuming that stakeholder believed it, okay, don't worry, I will raise the change request on my own. And he says that I have raised the change request when I can see the change. Like many times, business people, they think that as they have raised the change request, they will get it within very short time period. Now, project manager has to communicate back that raising a change request does not mean we will work on it. We are following change control process. It will go through a process, and it doesn't mean that you have asked for something that we will provide it. Then your business user may get irritated that what is this change control process? So project manager may end up explaining that it has set of procedures that describe how the modifications are managed and controlled. Great. So this is a kind of conversation which gives you an idea that, okay, you have a change request, but it goes through a formal change control process, and as per the change control process, the change request will be handled. Now, another poll where I want to ask that, do we need to raise a change request for all the changes asked by stakeholder? Because, in a project environment, you may get bombarded with so many changes. So true and false type of questions are usually tricky, because in project management, the life is never true and false. And that is something you should keep in mind when you deal with your PMP exam. don't select the choices which are extreme. There is nothing must mandatory in project management. So if you have a choice which talks about this is the only way of doing it, be cautious about it. There is a high probability that that choice is wrong, because in project management, a lot of things depends upon the context. So many times the test taker put a trap of putting everything in a black and white. So this poll was that can the change request will be added at the any stage of our project. We do have answers to it. So I'm just sharing it, but I would be discussing this particular poll at the later stage. My mistake. I posted the wrong poll. And here, yeah. So majority of you believe true and only few believes false. So we will be talking about it when I reach that particular segment. That was a bit a confusion. So I think I don't have a poll here, and we will take care of it in a subsequent polls. So let's take a question and answer here. If we talk about the answers of this particular poll, we can say that yes, a change request not necessarily to be raised for all changes, because there can be some changes which can be done without change request. So again, depend upon your change control process, and there could be some changes which may not go, which may not qualify for change request, because they are clearly excluded in a project exclusion or in a project charter exclusion. So something which has been clearly excluded, you may not need to raise a change request for it, and something which may not need a change request. For example, a stakeholder comes and says that I need to get the weekly status report from tomorrow onwards. I know that you have been sending it to some set of stakeholders, but can't you include me in it? So it is something like you are changing your communication management plan, but it may require a change request and it may goes without it. Again, depends upon your change management plan. So here is time to take questions before we go into the second segment of the session. So the first question is that is change always result in a scope creep? Not necessarily. See, we need to believe in that scope creep, gold plating has nothing to do with change management. The scope creep and gold plating is something which you do in your project without following change management process. So if you're following change management process, you are not doing scope creep. You just want to include the latest learning in your project, and it should not be treated as a scope creep or a gold plating. So there is some specific question towards Agile. I will see that once I am done with the rest of the question, I can and take it. So change management plan, who will define and approve it? This is something like you will talk about in your responsibility assignment matrix when you talk about who does what. But change management plan is prepared by the project manager, and the stakeholders plays a very crucial role in it. Usually the change management plan is approved by a sponsor. It depends upon the type of project you are dealing in. If you have a fixed, so for a PMP exam point of view, by default, you can think of that you are dealing fixed price kind of project when that the information is not given in a question. So in a fixed price, fixed scope kind of project, it is primarily driven by the sponsor because he's the one who is funding it. In other type of projects, it can be driven by the customer, or some of the other stakeholder may play a role there. So where should we document a change request? You will have a project management information system. Many organization has a system where they can raise a change request. Many organization work on a MS Word based off change request forms. It is all depending upon your organization process asset and your enterprise environmental factor, that how do you document and where do you store the change request. So now interesting questions that from exam point of view, all changes require change request if this option is given. So yes, if you have a situation and you don't have a background information and out of the option it is showing that you need to raise a change request for this, it's safer to pick up that particular option because by default you should be following a very stringent change management process. We got a one question related to configuration management plan. So we have a one video which talks about configuration management and configuration plan. If you search on Google configuration management iZenBridge, you will get to that particular video. If you are a PMI member, so PMI has a one practice guide which is dealing with the configuration management. It's a 50-60 page booklet. It's a PDF document you can download and read about configuration management. And configuration management has been taken as a bigger umbrella where the change management plan or a change control process falls under it. So configuration management plan is a wider in its scope and its procedures. So here we are back with our slides, and let's talk impact of changes on cost. So there were many questions which were talking about that. What do we do if internal people keep talking about changes? What do we do when the change request looks like a scope creep? As a project manager, as a project team, you should understand that you have a limit in understanding the real business value of the change. We people are more focused on cost of change, but so what should we do? We should make the cost of change visible to our stakeholders by way of providing impact analysis. Now, if you are following a fixed price, fixed scope project, then it may be an additional cost to your client. So it depends upon a proposal, or it depends upon a contractual agreement that who pays for that particular change. But in a simple sense, if the stakeholders, if the change control board is approving that particular change, as a project team, you should understand that that must be giving a business value more than it is costing to us. Now, does it cost? Yes, it really costs a lot. In a predictive life cycle, in a life cycle where we try to baseline the complete project scope, complete design, ahead in a project duration, like at the initial stage, if you change anything at a later stage, it will cost you a lot. And that is why in projects where changes are expected frequently, we follow adaptive life cycle. In case of an adaptive life cycle, we try to keep cost of change more or less constant throughout the project life cycle. Means that we don't elaborate all the requirement, we elaborate progressively, we elaborate only the part which we want to implement. And if a stakeholder is coming up with a change for a requirement which we have not yet started working on, we should not be spending any money for changing that, because we have not yet started elaborating that thing. So the processes like Agile, Scrum, they follow adaptive life cycle, and they try to keep the cost of change constant across the project life cycle. So as a stakeholder, as a project manager, you should be clear explaining this to your stakeholder, and if they decide to change even in the predictive life cycle, they can do it. And another point we should keep in mind, do not follow a predictive life cycle if you see lots of change coming in the mid of the project. It means you might have selected the wrong life cycle. You could not you thought you can predict the requirement, you thought you can predict the complete process, but you were wrong, because that is why you are getting a lot of changes. So you may need to change your life cycle towards adaptive, towards agile. So change cost. So as a project manager, you need to focus on preventing unnecessary changes. Now the word unnecessary is important. You should not think of that changes are problem. You should think of that I need to manage change, but I need to prevent unnecessary error and omission kind of changes. The changes which are coming from defect repairs should be removed, should be taken back to zero. So a project manager should try that he creates enough opportunities for the stakeholders to know about the product early in the project life cycle, at the right moment, so that they can provide the feedback ahead of baselining, or ahead of your deliverable inspection. So you should proactively keep looking for preventing unnecessary changes, but it does not mean that you need to prevent all the changes. Now, what is this integrated change control? So we had a question that, okay, changes is always about scope and changes is always raised by external party. In case of a project management, in case of a PMBOK or PMP exam, we talk about integrated change control. So changes, you want to replace this particular developer from this project to another project. It's a change. You want to outsource part of your development work to a different vendor. You don't want to do it on your own. It's a change. You definitely, scope change is a change. There could be an impact of weather. There is like it starts raining heavily in an area where you are executing project, and the forecast is that it is going to rain for next 15 days. Now you need to change your schedule because you might have scheduled some activities which are dependent on your current 15 days of work. You need to manage this particular change, and you need to inform your parties. It could be external parties that you are not delivering something at the end of 15 days and there is a change because this change is coming because of weather thing. Now the individual knowledge areas. So when we have a weather change, we may not look at how the weather change impacts the resource movement, how the weather change impacts the scope, impacts the cost, and other areas of the project. So the integrated change control looks into that how a one area impacts the complete project. So if you look at a PMBOK definition, it talks about the process of reviewing all change requests, approving changes, and managing changes to deliverable, organization process asset, project documents, and project management plan, and communicating their disposition. So this is something which is done at an integrated change control level. Now we have something called change control port. So who is this port? Who decides that should we go ahead with this particular change? In many complex projects, so when we talk about PMP exam, you need to think of a project which has at least 100 people working in it. So you have a complex project which is running for a long duration. You may not have a one person who can take a decision that, okay, this is right, go ahead and do it. You may need to have a group who takes care of approving, rejecting, or postponing the changes. So this group is called change control board. It usually have people who are needed to make such kind of decision. Sponsor is part of it because he's the one who will be end up paying money. There could be a customer representative, business representative, because they are the one who are receiving your product when you delivers it to the market. There could be a project level representation coming from project managers, function representatives, subject matter experts, who talks about the feasibility, who talks about the cost associated with the change. So you can have a specialist who can contribute in making a decision about that do we really need to change these particular things in order to get this project more value. So we constitute a change control board. Now many times change control board could be of a multiple levels. For example, there could be a definition of a change request which says that if change is for less than 7 days, I don't want to include sponsor. For such small things, do I need to call such a big board meeting? You can define that, okay, this type of changes can be just approved by a project manager and technical expert. So you may have a smaller board which takes care of part of change request, which can be defined in your change management plan, and then you can have a bigger group or a more authorized group which takes a call related to the changes which has bigger impact on the project. Now let's look at a change request flow. And this will clear some of the confusions which are related to that when to do what. So you get an idea, a stakeholder comes up with a change request. You have explained him to log the change request. So he will log the change request. Now it can be logged by the stakeholder, it can be logged by the project manager and approved by the stakeholder. And this is a formal proposal of change. Now the conversation is over. If you want a project team to seriously look at your conversation related to change, you need to put the formal proposal. Now it goes next to an impact analysis, and this is primarily done by project team. So project manager may coordinate that particular activity. He may look into the technical part, he may look into the cost associated with it, he may look into the risk associated with that particular changes. So a project team facilitated by a project manager does the impact analysis. Once they are done with an impact analysis, You will have most of the organizations who are following a proper change management process where you can log the change request. You will have a way where you can update the result of your impact analysis. So you update the change request with this all impact analysis. And finally, as a project manager, when you see that, okay, we are done with an impact analysis and this looks, all the inputs have been received, he or she will submit this particular change request to a change control board. Now, change control board, we have discussed, they are expert, they can look into the cost and benefits. They take the call on it that, okay, what should we do with this particular change? They look at the situation at hand, they look at project at hand, they look at value at hand, they look at the cost and risk associated with that particular change. And they decide either approving or rejecting, or they may decide to postpone, that this is not making sense as of now, we are not clear we should do it or not, let's postpone it for a 1 month and then we will look at it next month, because we want to get some more information or some more trend about it. So in this process, they may decide to approve, reject, or postpone the change. Once the decision has been taken, the change log has to be updated. So change log, you can think of a one log which has a change request, details of a change, and says that what decision has been taken on that particular change. And then the project manager, project team need to communicate that decision to the stakeholders, and especially to the person who has requested that particular change, that, okay, your change has been accepted, rejected with this particular justification, or we would be looking at your change after 1 month. So the communication should go back to the stakeholders. And if the change was approved, then the project manager and project team work and they update project baseline, project documents, or organization process asset, or a deliverable which is getting impacted because of this approved change request. Now, a good question. So when can change occur? So I know I had a poll and I raised this particular poll ahead of time. So the poll was that change request can be raised at any stage, or can the change request raised at any stage of the project, and the answer was in true and false. And I understand that most of you have answered it true. Now, this is another confusion which I see in a lot of test takers, and it has two dimensions to it. Does the flow of handling change request changes with the stage of the project? For example, you are at a UAT stage, and at that particular stage, customer comes up with a change which has a very big impact. Now, you cannot do an impact analysis at this particular stage, but you know this is going to be huge. So what should you do? Should you just log the change request and then follow an impact analysis and not to inform the critical stakeholders, sponsors about this particular change? The answer is no, you won't be doing it. If you have a change which really shakes your complete project, you may want to communicate to the critical stakeholders first that such kind of change has been raised. We are not yet done with the complete impact analysis, but this is going to be huge. So you may decide to communicate about that particular change request if it comes at a critical stage, or if it really impacts your project badly. If it's a normal scenario, the impact is not that huge. You follow a normal change management process. You don't have to inform the stakeholders as you get the change and say that we have a change. You follow the complete process. It goes to a change control board, and they will take a call as per the defined change management plan. So your change management plan should take care of all these scenarios. But when you give a PMP exam, you do need to consider such practical situations and these kind of practical implications which a project manager deals with when he deals with a change request. The another question is that you are at a very early stage of the project, like you are just created a stakeholder register. You don't even have a project management plan. You don't even have a work breakdown structure. You may not have even a project scope document. Now somebody comes up with that we need to include this particular person as a critical stakeholder in the stakeholder register. Can you just include him, or do you need to add a change request for him? Again, depends what type of project you are dealing with. One thing is that change management plan may get agreed far before then your scope, time, cost baselines get agreed. So you may not have a baseline project management plan, but as you start your project, you do have an understanding of how we are going to handle the changes. And if you have a change management plan which talks about that the stakeholder register cannot be just modified without a change request, you may need to raise a change request even before your scope baseline, time baseline, cost baseline is arrived. And it can happen for a requirement document. Now, stakeholder register, you may find out, okay, why for such a small thing we have to do it. Think about a requirement document. You had a long workshop with your project stakeholders, and you come up with a detailed requirement document, and you are now looking at scope. You are defining scope, creating work breakdown structure, but somewhere some stakeholder raises during a walkthrough, he raises that this is something which is not working. And there could be a cases where your requirement document may work as a deliverable, even if you don't have a baseline plan, but it may work a baseline scope or cost, but the requirement document itself is a deliverable. So in those kind of cases, you may, and especially for a requirement document, you may follow a proper change management. So here I summarize, and I know many questions which you have raised in a previous segment should have been answered through this content. So like changes is something which is needed to modify document, deliverable, or baseline. Change is required due to change in environment, team learning, technology. A lot of factors can lead to a change, and change request can be raised by stakeholder, project, including project manager. And when we talk about stakeholder, it's a bigger group, like which includes sponsor, team, everybody who is negatively, positively getting affected by the project or project results. Change can be managed by following a change control process or following a formal process. And change request is a formal process, a formal proposal for change. And we start with logging a change, impact analysis, submitting to a CCB, update change log once we have a decision, and then we update a project baselines. So yes, I would be taking questions now. This is the final Q&A part and the interaction does not end with this particular webinar. If you have any questions related to PMP, PMI, ACP, PBA, Scrum Alliance related products, CSP, feel free to raise your queries at forum.izenbridge.com. Me, my team, we try to answer your queries at a shortest possible time. And the forum has grown on its own. Now we have a community which takes care of a lot of questions. I know many of you are very active user of forum. So please do visit a forum to raise your queries and subsequent interaction. I'm sure that most of you must be aware of our website and YouTube channel. And we keep doing online PMP, PMI, ACP, PBA, and a lot of other stuff you can explore. Okay, so I'm going again from the top and trying to figure it out if I have missed something. So Agile, I am not talking specifically. We will see. In Agile also, we don't talk about that the team gets involved in the changes. But again, the product owner will have some mechanism by which he takes, approves, rejects stakeholder request. Because so we define a role called product owner, and he takes care of complete change management process. So we can think it like this. So can we change the change control board during the project execution? The answer is yes. That itself is a change. So you may raise a change request to change a change control procedure. You may raise a change request to change a change control board. So yes, you can even change the change management plan. So why not? If you are finding this particular plan is not working, you raise a change. So I think Nidhi's query related to change control and scope have been resolved because we have gone through a detailed things. I think Amit's query is also taken. So change control board, etc., etc. So the question is that do we need to learn about configuration management for project PMP certification? The answer is very little. So we have a video on configuration management. If you see on YouTube, you will get the answer. Beyond that, for PMP exam, you don't have to learn. You just need to know about configuration accounting, configuration identification, and that's its configuration audit. So if you understand these 3-4 terms, you are good. The another question is coming that can we use a contingency reserve for implementing the approved change request? The answer could be yes, and answer could be wrong. No, it depends what type and what magnitude of change it is. Usually, the approved change request means that you can change the baselines. So if you are getting an approval to change a baseline, means you can even go beyond your contingency reserve. Okay, so when do we prepare a change management plan? That is the question. The answer is develop project management plan is a process which takes care of change management plan. It is something which is done at a very initial stage. You can keep upgrading it, keep refining it as you have more visibility about handling changes. But this is something which is usually done at the beginning of the planning stage. You start planning with defining change management plan and project life cycle. So there are few decisions which you take at a very early stage of the project, and some of them is like project tailoring, which all processes you would be following in your project, which particular life cycle you would be following in your project, and what kind of change management procedures, change management plan you would be following in your project. So these kind of decisions are taken when in a process called develop project management plan and during the initial stage of the project. So who communicates the change request decisions to a stakeholder? So it gets updated as per your change, say communication management plan. So usually the project team, there is a process of updating the change log. And if you see a lot of stakeholder management processes, you will find that change log is coming as an input. So if you look at some of the stakeholder management related processes, you will see the change log is taken as an input. So as per the communication management plan, the change related decisions get updated. I personally see that this is something which is done by project managers because or a project management team. So is a sponsor having any role in a change request part? Yes, he's the one who can raise the change request. He's a critical person who approves or rejects the change request, because having a change control board without a sponsor is kind of rare. So you will have a sponsor or a representative of sponsor sitting in a change control board, because he's the one who is paying for the project. So he should know what kind of changes you are looking at. How to manage a schedule? So Nidhi is asking a question, how to manage a schedule if a change is approved, if end date of a project is fixed. You need to find out what possible you can do with the help of a stakeholders. It could result into a negative float, like your project schedule is showing a date which is going beyond your fixed date. But this is a situation which needs to be discussed and handled through another change request. So you may have a one change request which is raising your change schedule, then you need to come up with another change request, which may be a reduction of scope to take care of this change. So this is something case by case. It depends upon which project, what kind of things you are handling it. What tool do we use to manage changes? So as a PMP answer, you should have a project management information system. You will find many of these integrated project management tool having have a flow, a project lifecycle management, product lifecycle management tools. They do take care of a change request, and you can and see them. Okay, so do you submit a change request before setting a baseline? I think we have discussed it well. Yes, there could be scenarios. Where is the position of an action plan in a change request flow? Action plan, I am not clear. So it is once the change request is approved, then you need to plan it. You don't plan all the changes. You can think of a possibility that out of 100, maybe 20% changes will get approved. So you don't want to plan for all the changes, because only the one which gets approved. You do an impact analysis, but though you don't create an action plan or a schedule a modification for unapproved changes. So the talking about, like, we update project management plan and baseline means we create an action plan to implement that. So that's the last stage. So can we have a change request at the time of a closing of project? So what closing? So it means like you are doing a project closure, very rare, but depending upon the situation. So if you have a change request, you are no more in closing, you have come back. So if you are doing a closing process and somebody raises a change request, and if you are evaluating it, it means you are no more in a closing process. You have left that closing process and you have moved somewhere else. You are into a perform integrated change control. So you do a perform integrated change control and you see that do it. The question is, does the change management plan becomes a part of a project management plan? The answer is yes. Another question is that do we need to capture information about change request in lesson learned? The answer is yes. It is your project records. Your all change requests are part of project records, and they usually become a good source of lesson learned. So there was another question that which change management plan every time do we need to update the risk management plan? I don't see that. You don't have to update a risk management plan every time you work on change request or a change management plan. So now there is some question came is the difference between project plan and project documents. So there is a table in a PMBOK which makes it clear that which all are called project documents and what all is called project plan. So a plan itself could be a document, but as far as PMBOK language, we keep these two things separate, project documents and project plans. So now the question is that I said that sponsor is the one who is part of change control board because he is the one who is paying it. Hamid is thinking that customer is the one who is paying it. So let's we have a video on the role of sponsor. We need to be very clear that what is sponsor and what is customer. A customer has given an order to your company. The order could be of 10 million. Your sponsor may have given you only 1 million to finish that particular order. So your money is coming from the sponsor. Sponsor may get 10 million out of it. Sponsor may get only 500,000 out of it. So in a fixed price kind of project, again, it depends upon a project environment. Sponsor is the one who is funding the project. He is funding for a business goal. He is getting money out of it, but he makes the decisions that what goes in and what kind of baselines you are following. So I would recommend, please look at our sponsors role video. It will clarify these particular questions further. Okay, friends, join our forum. Any subsequent query related to this particular web event or anything. I saw many people asking about critical path, many people asking about configuration management. So there were a lot of queries coming related to other topics. Please post them into a forum. We will take some of them for our next month webinar as well. Thank you, friends, and thanks for joining in, posting a lot of interesting questions in this particular webinar. Hope to see you again in some of our web event. Thanks for joining.